So today I'm going to try and answer the question, can ChatGPT write Google Ads scripts and can it write them well? And related, will I be out of a job soon? I think that's going to be interesting to talk about as well. So let's crack on. The first thing I wanted to do is a really basic report. So I'm saying, get me campaign performance for today. I've included the metrics I want, and then I've just said log the results to the console. Now, the first time it did this, it didn't work. So I'll copy this code and run it. And you notice at the top here, it's saying report range is adsapp.report, then it's adding a date, and then this report range, it isn't actually being used. It doesn't do anything within this get stats. So maybe that's just something to generally look out for. And I would suggest a fix other than looking out for it. But then on the next run, the only thing I've added is remember to use during today with the date range, which isn't really related. And the reason I've said that is I've ran this a few times now, and I've noticed that it just doesn't quite get the date range right. So that just makes sure that it works. And yeah, for some reason, it deleted that bit of erroneous code. And now if I copy it, it just works. So that's great. And it is worth bearing in mind, this was essentially one or two runs and it just fixed itself. But often that doesn't work. So there's two things to keep an eye on for even basic reporting are it adding code that doesn't make any sense, it getting mixed up when creating the query. But otherwise, that's a decent start. Okay, let's look at something a little bit more advanced. And I say the word advanced with a pinch of salt because this is still pretty basic despite the length of the prompt. Most of this is just things that I've noticed it's making a mistake on. So I've told it what to improve. And in some instances, I've even said, this is the specific code you need to use, which arguably isn't ideal because if you're not a programmer, you won't know to recognize that and sort of ask it. And so straight away, I would say that for marketers that can't program, this is pretty limited to creating reports. But you know what? That's still good, isn't it? It's still useful. And so what is this trying to do? It's trying to say, still get me the campaign performance, but then forecast the campaign cost for the month based on this month's spend. And then compare the forecast to a budget, which we're going to provide from a sheet. So these are the settings, and then this is the report. Now, this is ChatGPT 3.5, and it's giving me all this, and then it sort of cuts off a little bit. So I've put it all together, and then I've fixed a couple of things manually, and I won't bore you with the details, but it doesn't work. And I'm not 100% sure why. And when I've eventually asked and said, can you help? And I've said what's wrong. It says to investigate further, add console.log. So it's sort of saying, I don't know, but you can investigate further by doing this, which doesn't really help me. And I want to keep this video purely ChatGPT. I don't want to go in and program and fix things. It's not what it's about. So I would just call that a hurdle we can't get over because it's just sort of giving up. It might be possible with a lot more effort and just sort of rewriting things that this would work. And I would say when I use this personally, what I prefer to do is write these functions individually anyway. And then what you can also do is sort of say, create dummy data based on what this function, for example, will return. And then you can run this data against the other functions and start to do things like that. But that's a discussion for another day. Now, I didn't want to just leave this not working. So I also asked ChatGPT version 4 to do the same thing. And this is roughly what it gave us. Now, it's a much shorter script, and there's certain things that it didn't do quite as well. So for example, here, it's trying to set values for the settings instead of reading the settings in, which isn't really right. what I said was to use the named ranges that I had set up in the sheet, as you can tell from the prompt. But then it's getting the report, it's processing it, and it's mainly working. So then I've pasted it in and I ran it, and this is the result. It's got the cost for the month, which isn't much. This is just a dummy account. And then it's forecasted that after spending £1 yesterday, I will spend £283 in the rest of the month. I have no idea where it's got that from because it's complete nonsense. You would generally just times that by 31 rather than coming up with this number. And then the cost difference between this and the budget. So the budget is 10, so that's not right. And then it didn't give me a percentage. So look, this is still better. It's given us something. We've got some sort of output, but obviously there's some problems. And I imagine this is the sort of thing that you could more easily just ask it to update for you. So to wrap this up, as we learned from the first script, if you're just asking for a simple report, it'll do it and it'll do a good job. And if we were to say export that data to a sheet, then that will work. And given all of the reports and everything you can do with that, whether it's reporting on different data ranges in the same spreadsheet or downloading that data and working with it in Excel, it's still really useful. From a programmer's point of view, it's also useful. So even if it isn't going to write more complex scripts, it can still write individual functions and bits of code, as whilst it doesn't know Google Ads scripts very well, it certainly knows JavaScript very well. So if you just need to say, calculate this metric or find this string in this array, it can do that really easily. The thing with Google Ads scripts specifically is there aren't that many of them available online. And because this is from September 2021, it's mostly AdWords scripts, which is the old version, and that's what it's giving you. If you go onto the website, it'll tell you this is now defunct, use the new version. But luckily, the old code still works, so it's fine, it does the job. And lastly, it's worth noting that it also generally gets mixed up with the actual API, which is completely different from a programming point of view. And then it gets mixed up with AppScript, which is code that you might add to a Google Sheet or to a standalone AppScript project. But yeah, on the whole, use it, pay the $20 a month. I think it's well worth it, even if you're just getting a faster ChatGPT 3.5 experience. Brilliant.